so that they can enjoy some Southern hospitality. On numerous occasions, we're privileged to arrange their visits to museums and park settings. In fact, some of our visitors do their research prior to arriving in Alabama, and they ask us to visit, can they visit a national or state park while they're here? So today we welcome two panelists who will share historic and preservation strategies of our natural creations. Our first speaker will be Christine Del Valle, who joined the U.S. Department of State as a Foreign Service Officer in 2001. By the way, she's calling in from Brussels. We are just so thankful for not only her participation, but the fact that she is the product of the Una Chapman Cox Foundation and her department, which arranged for her to journey to 29 states and 2 U.S. territories so that she could visit more than 85 units of the National Park Service to promote the importance of historical, cultural, and natural preservation. This was a fellowship, and she was certified as a California naturalist and a certified interpretive guide as a result of the project. I'm really very, very pleased to know that she was able to have her 2 children accompany her during this fellowship. And she now has a podcast, Expedition National Parks. So she encourages listeners to engage with these less known and appreciated sites and histories. Christine has had the privilege to serve our country as a Foreign Service Officer in the United Arab Emirates, Mumbai, Vienna, Kabul, and Jakarta, as well as in Washington, D.C. as a policy advisor in the U.S. Senate. Her most recent overseas assignment was the Public Affairs Officer in Dubai, and we are working nationally to help with the Dubai 2020, which is not going to take place in 2020, but the World Expo. And so we're busy trying to serve the team there in identifying students and entertainment for the U.S. Pavilion. So our crowds are passing. Christine reached out to us, and we saw this as a wonderful opportunity to focus attention on our state parks. So we'll begin our presentation today with Christine, followed by our second panelist, who I will introduce after Christine's presentation. Christine, you've got the show now.
Thank you very much. Really appreciate that really nice introduction, and really appreciate the opportunity to be here. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And get to my presentation. So, you can see it. Okay, there we go. So on this trip, let me just explain. I started it about a year ago, and it was for 1 year, my fellowship, and it has concluded, but I'm continuing on because I'm very passionate about it. So I am currently in Brussels. I just started a new job, very different. I'm working at for NATO, so very different, but I continue my interest in the national parks. And after arriving here in Brussels, I learned that it's one of the greenest capitals in the world, and I think #1 in Europe. And about 50% of the city is green. So we've been able to, enjoy some city parks and forests so far. So I can't say I did not grow up with with parents that brought me camping or going to national parks. It's something kind of I discovered kind of along the way, because as a Foreign Service Officer, after every kind of foreign rotation, you're encouraged and strongly encouraged by they give you home leave, as it's called, and you go back to the United States. It has to be taken in the United States. And so as my kids became older, I planned more road trips for us, like to discover the United States, because I grew up on the West Coast and then went to school on the East Coast, and of course, you know, the State Department's on the East Coast, so I knew the coasts very well, but I didn't know that much about places in between. So in 2016, we kind of did a Midwestern jaunt, starting in West Virginia and ending in Tennessee, and then the following year, we did a southern kind of road trip. We went through Alabama and starting in Atlanta and finishing in Kansas City. So this is us at Tuskegee Airmen, just showing you a few photos. So I have 4 children, but only 2 accompany me on the older ones, because there's like a kind of a six-year gap. 2 of them I took out of school, and we kind of homeschooled road school last year. But they're a lot younger here. This is from the 2017 trip. Tuskegee Airmen, Tuskegee Institute, and of course Selma. This is them being sworn in for Junior Ranger, sworn in as Junior Rangers, and that's something I'll talk about at the end. That Junior Rangers, I discovered, it took me probably my 50th trip to a national park. You don't have to be a kid to participate. The books can be, they're not that they're difficult, but they really help you engage with the park and learn a lot more about them. And of course, Selma. And so, okay, I'll just, because the other one is a video. So what I envisioned, and I kind of put in my proposal, because basically it's a sabbatical leave fellowship, so it's very flexible, but you do submit a proposal and state what your intentions are. And what I had outlined was that I would try to go to national parks and do my best, and I still hadn't really figured out how I would do it, to try to promote the lesser known parks. Because you hear a lot about the Yosemites and the Yellowstones, but not about the many other parks, the 357 parks outside of the national parks designation that are in the system. And so I'm going to show some photos of what, when you think of national parks, what a lot of people will envision. This is Yellowstone. Let's see, I think it should be Old Faithful erupting in winter. We went there, it was fabulous. We went in January, and someone said it was like being in a snow globe, and it really truly was. I'd highly encourage anyone to visit that can in the winter. Bison, Grand Canyon of the Yellowstone. We kind of made our own flag, and that's what our flag is there. This is Thunder Hole in Acadia National Park. Got a little wet here. And we went in the fall, magnificent scenery. This is Haleakala in Hawaii, Bryce Canyon. So those are, that's what a lot of people envision when I tell them I would go visit national parks. But there's so many vistas and historical sites beyond that. And I think this map gives you a really good, perspective on it. There's 419 units of the national park system. And up here, I know you can't see it, but they're all the different abbreviations for the designations. So most people kind of consider only the national park designation when they think of national parks. So like Yosemite, Yellowstone, Glacier, etc. But there are many more that don't have that designation. And they're just as beautiful or just as interesting. It's just that they were protected in a different way. So the backdrop that I have behind me, for example, is Muir Woods, and that's I think once again kind of a classic scene that people think of, forests and things like that. Muir Woods was protected as a national monument in 1908, and it was among the first 20. So it's a monument, it's not a park, but once again, what the designation doesn't matter. It does matter to people who are kind of park collectors. There are 62 national parks right now, and some people kind of set it as a goal to go to all of them. Some people have achieved all 419, but that's a lot. When I've talked to people who are really avid park enthusiasts, I think sometimes they set that goal of this national parks because it's a bit easier to obtain than the 419. So as I kind of started on the journey, and even beforehand, I thought, what kind of connections are there, between these parks and diplomacy? So I want to kind of outline kind of three kind of sub themes and some parks that I found in each kind of category. And the first category is how the beauty itself of a park can inspire individuals to be their best selves and strive to work with others for cooperation and peace. And so an example of this is Grand Teton National Park. Unfortunately, because of COVID, you'll hear that a lot, I didn't make it. And I should explain that I was about halfway through the fellowship when this happened. And what I kind of had front loaded a lot of the kind of more far flung destinations in the first half, like Hawaii, Puerto Rico, Virgin Islands. I knew that and Alaska would be too complicated to do. So I hadn't planned for that. But the spring and summer, I was really envisioning as a very long road trip all throughout the United States, and to spend longer periods kind of in different communities, such as yours. And the plan was to reach out to groups such as yours, because I'm so interested in meeting you, because you are the people who host the international visitors that we help recruit on the other end overseas. So my last foreign assignment was as public affairs officer in Dubai. And of course, we would recruit the international visitors and send them, and we would get a little bit of a debrief when they came back. And they would always say how much they enjoyed meeting the Americans, the home hospitality. That's always like the highest, rating that they get. And when we would do the pre-briefing, we'd find out where they were going. It would be so interesting, because we always do try in an international visitor program to kind of get them a bit of variety and diversity in terms of geography. So in any case, this is Grand Tetons, and it served as the site of a meeting between Foreign Minister Shevardnadze and Secretary of State James Baker in the late 80s. And the meeting itself was at Jackson Lake Lodge inside the national park itself. And they went fishing together. And I'm just going to read something from an article from the New York Times that described it as more productive than most of the meetings between American and Soviet foreign ministers in recent years. More progress was made here on arms control than at the Moscow summit meeting last year between President Ronald Reagan and President Gorbachev. So I really think that the location and the fact that they really got to know each other and get beyond, to the personal level really helped them. This goes back to Muir Woods. It's a little distorted because it's an old picture. So it's actually the 75th anniversary of the signing of the UN Charter. That was in June, but in May, there was a very special meeting of all the delegates to the UN Charter Conference in San Francisco at Muir Woods, because Muir Woods is not very far away. And I will share with you a little video that the United Nations Association Marin County put together to commemorate the anniversary.
Today, in the very heart of Muir Woods National Monument, a bronze plaque quietly reminds visitors that an event of international significance took place here amid the profound silence and serenity of the ancient redwoods as World War II was coming to an end. But 75 years ago, the world was at war, our nation mourning the loss of President Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Recently sworn in President Truman's first decision was to proceed with the San Francisco Peace Conference. And so on April 25th, 1945, 268 delegates representing 46 nations gathered in San Francisco to open the first session of the United Nations Conference. The atmosphere was solemn. The delegates worked hard on difficult issues. On May 19th, they took time off to honor the memory of FDR, a lover of trees, with a walk and ceremony among the peaceful, timeless redwoods of Muir Woods.
So I think that gives you a good overview of why the place is special. And I did not know until I actually went to the site, and I was just talking to one of the volunteers and the rangers, you know, about the project and what we were there, and if was there any connections. And they said, oh, you know, Cathedral Grove. And, you know, originally it was not intended, of course, to be a memorial service. It was intended to bring the delegates together to kind of inspire them to work for, in a very special place, this temple of peace, as they called it. Because being in nature, just any type of nature, you know, changes your mindset. But being in a place where there's so much history and time, you know, it changes you as a person. And I think they were trying to get the delegates there to think, you know, beyond themselves as individuals or as, you know, representative countries, and to think about the world. So that's like the first category. And the second category, that in terms of national parks related to diplomacy, I found sites that were designed to commemorate a place to celebrate peaceful resolution through diplomacy. So really highlighting the important role diplomacy can play. And I found this in Chamizal. This is called the Chamizal National Memorial in El Paso, Texas. And this is a picture of the mural that's kind of outside the visitor center. We were there on a rainy day, as you can see. I had not heard of this site. I found out about it from a colleague when I was just chatting about my plans, and I said, do you have any places? So I would love to hear in the Q&A if you have any suggestions of places, because I keep adding to my list of things that are relevant. And this place is important because, you know, the Rio Grande, you know, was the border marker, but as, you know, it's a river, it shifted course, and it left people and, you know, in the wrong side of the country. So there was like little pockets of you know, Mexican land that was now in the United States and vice versa, and they really needed to figure this out. And it was something that it kind of dragged on for like more than 100 years, and it was a source of a lot of tension. But with the Cold War, President Kennedy wanted to kind of increase, you know, positive relations with Mexico. So he and the president of Mexico decided that this was something that they were going to really, you know, focus on solving. Unfortunately, President Kennedy died before he saw it come to fruition, but President Johnson took it up, and this was him at the official ceremony of this, you know, celebrating the successful treaty and the change in the border. And Mexico established a park on the Mexican side, and there's one on the American side, and it's very much dedicated toward it's very different than a lot of parks. It's more of an urban park, but it also has a big performing arts center, and they, pre-COVID, would do a lot of different festivals, drama, really bringing people together, celebrating cross-border culture and the people's the cross-border relationship. And that's, you know, my kids mimicking the handshake. Then there were sites that celebrate specific individuals, history-making individuals, including with those who've had success in the diplomatic sphere, and then that serve as an inspiration. So the first, one of the first sites we visited, because we spent the first 6 weeks in DC, was the Frederick Douglass National Historic Site, which is just inside TV. It's inside DC, and it's actually up on a little hill, and you can see the Capitol from there. This is I just thought this was an interesting kind of collage showing him through the years. And I mean, he was so many things: abolitionist, suffrage, celebrated orator, author, editor, but also a diplomat, which I didn't know until I visited the site. His exact title was not ambassador, but that's basically what he served, that role. Like, it was like minister to Haiti. And this is a kind of an artistic rendering of that, him later in life. And that's his home on Cedar Hill. It's quite beautiful. And then you can't see, but the visitor center is kind of below. Then another site that I kind of discovered that I didn't originally think had a connection was the Clara Barton National Historic Site, and that's very close to DC, but just over the border in Maryland. And it was her home and the American Red Cross headquarters for many years. And it was like I was reading one of they call it a wayside, just one of the signs, on the side of the path on the way up to the house, where I was reading that she heard about the Red Cross when she was, volunteering and working in Europe, and she wanted the U.S. to be a part of it, but she had to lobby Congress so that they could accede to the Geneva Convention in order to become part of the Red Cross. So this is actually a letter that she wrote to the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, kind of lobbying. So it was something I didn't, realize until I visited the site. And then there is the Marsh Billings Rockefeller National Historic Park, and George Perkins Marsh, that's him on the left. He was our first ambassador to Italy, but before that, he grew up in Vermont, and his boyhood home is actually the centerpiece of this National Historic Park. And he was very impacted by the deforestation that he saw growing up in Vermont, and he, just witnessing like the further impacts, on erosion and things like that. And he served 21 years as minister to Italy, so quite a record. And there he saw the impact of European deforestation. And it was actually in Italy that he published one of his seminal work, Man and Nature, which changed people's perception on the relationship between humans and the land. So that's the home. So now I'm going to talk, those are the three kind of categories of parks that I found. I want to also just talk about the Office of International Affairs within the National Park Service, and some of the work that they do on the international stage. And one thing is that they manage the Sister Parks program. I think that this is the closest park to you all that has a sister park. It's the Mammoth Cave in Kentucky, and they're partnered with a park in China. And there's, I think, 60 sister parks around the country. And you can see, if you go to the National Park website, you can find out more about them. Of course, these are your parks in Alabama, as well as affiliated areas. Plus, you have some amazing state parks as well. And I mean, and that's the one thing I learned in this journey is, I focused on the national parks, but then I kind of felt a little guilty because there's also the public lands. There's U.S. Forest Service lands, Bureau of Land Management. There's the state parks, city parks, county parks, So I'm not saying that, we're very blessed in the United States to have parks at all different levels. And there's something, in everyone's backyard. In some backyards have a lot more, but I mean, there's quite a few in Alabama, and I'd encourage you to visit as many as you can if you haven't already. And the other thing that the Office of International Affairs does is that they do some technical consultations. So they work in partnership with different countries. So like right now, for example, China is really actively developing its national park system, and the National Park Service has been working with them. There's also State Department programs. When I was in Dubai, we organized kind of a Discover in America event with the Department of Commerce, the Foreign Commercial Service. And one of our centerpieces was focused on the national parks and promoting tourism. And we brought over a National Park Service representative who kind of headlined our a film screening of National Parks Adventure. And that was attended by the Minister of the Environment from the UAE. So, I mean, it really can help, develop relationships. And, even now, during COVID, it's still possible to visit. I would recommend that you check the websites before going. The National Park Service is trying to kind of capture people's attention in a lot of different ways to really promote the, hashtag recreate responsibly. So at all parks, not just the natural ones. And it's often the historic ones that are a little bit more tricky because indoor spaces are harder and there's more limitations in terms of movement. But I think the National Park Service has been doing a really amazing job, like being, inventive, moving the rangers outside to tables and trying to be as creative as possible to still kind of get the word out and allow people to visit the park. The Junior Ranger programs, once again, I think I mentioned it before. Some parks have not so Junior Ranger programs or for elders. But feel free at any park to ask for the Junior Ranger program. You can do them online as well. You earn a badge or maybe a patch afterwards. I took out a screenshot of the Catoctin Mountain Park Junior Ranger program because that is the home to Camp David. So you can't visit Camp David unless you have very special and you're invited, obviously, by the president. But there's a little bit of history about Camp David there. There's also a lot more virtual programming now from the national parks. So I encourage you there's so much information out there. And for those who are teachers or educators, there's curricula and special programs as well. And then just a little bit about the podcast that I started with my kids. It's called Expedition National Parks. And this week, we just did, I think we released it yesterday. Yes, yesterday, 31st, right? It's on the summer work travel program. So it's a J1 visa, so similar to the international visitors, but it's for university students who come to the United States for their summer to do, usually it's like seasonal type jobs, camp counselor, working in national park lodges. So I had met some during our journey, but we never were able to really chat to them because they were working. So I was able to interview some of them online. And that's this is Göksu. She's from Turkey. And she loved the program so much. She did it 3 years in a row. She has a lot to say about how friendly Americans are. She met a wonderful family at her first assignment in Rhode Island. She worked at the Breakers Mansion, and then she went to Glacier National Park and worked at Many Glacier Hotel for 2 seasons. So I actually, this is part 1, and I have another one coming out that'll be on 3 other, a brother, sister who worked at Acadia, and a gentleman that did not work at a park, but he loved the park so much he visited a lot of them. And then I also want to mention the International Volunteer in Parks program. So it sounds like IVLP, but it's another opportunity for a foreign citizen to come to the US to work in our national parks. So it's a smaller program. A lot of people don't know about it. So I hope to focus on that on that podcast as well. And finally, thank you very much. And I encourage you, if you do, sorry, let me try to get this on the screen. This is the Centennial edition of the passport, but they sell these passports online or in the parks. And a lot of people appreciate the opportunity to kind of record their trip by stamping their visits to the different parks. So thank you very much. And I will stop sharing and look forward to your questions afterwards.
Christine, thank you so much. What a fascinating presentation. My husband's a nature photographer, so I go along to see trees and leaves and not necessarily the history. And so now I've got some more information to add on the trips that we go on. So I'm excited. And Hannah, I'm so excited to have you, and I really appreciate how Christine has focused some attention during her presentation on Alabama. So when we learned of Christine's passion for this work, we said, well, we need to have an Alabamian as a panelist as well. And so we're thankful to have Hannah Garman, who's originally from Cordova, Alabama. She attended UNA, and she is working with the Alabama Historical Commission, as this was very interesting. The cemetery programs, Alabama Register of Landmarks and Heritage, historical markers, and survey coordinator. Her interests are varied, with a focus on Gothic revival architecture in Alabama, the civil rights history, and anything that's true crime related. I'm not going to ask her for details on that until after the call. We'll talk about that. She works and lives in Montgomery with her husband, son, and 2 dogs. So Hannah, what can you add about from a Alabama historic standpoint about what you're hearing in terms of diplomacy in our national parks?
Well, let me just tell you a little bit what our agency does. We're actually a state agency, so we're funded by you, the taxpayers in the state of Alabama. We also receive funding from the National Park Service through the Historic Preservation Fund, which was a fund that was set up through legislation in 1966 with the National Historic Preservation Act. So that act was kind of put in place because in the 50s and 60s, you had lots of demolition going on in culturally sensitive areas. You had lots of historic resources being lost to interstate construction, new road construction, the urbanization of downtowns. So you lost a lot of your historic fabric. There was no one there to kind of check what the federal government was doing with your cultural resources. So they passed this law in 1966, which set up a state historic preservation office in every state. There's also a state historic preservation office in the territories as well, Puerto Rico and Guam, I believe. So we have, I think, 52 SHPOs from around the United States. So what we do is we manage the Historic Preservation Fund, which is given to us through the National Park Service. And it's based upon your state population, your size, that sort of thing, how much funding you receive. When you receive that funding, you are then required to give at least 10% of that money out into your state. So whether that be certified local government grants or, preservation grants, brick and mortar preservation grants, different kinds of things. So we administer that. We also administer Section 106 review from the National Park Service or through the federal government. So that was something that was enacted through the Preservation Act of 1966, that when anything is using federal funding, it gets reviewed. So a cell tower project, a new roadway, a culvert in some cases, all of these projects then get reviewed through our office to make sure if they are impacting the cultural resource, such as archaeological or a built environment, then that they're being then mitigated. If there is an adverse effect, that doesn't stop the process from moving forward. It just mitigates those effects. So that could be a listing to the National Register. It could be putting a historical marker up. It could be doing, some kind of mitigation to discuss the history or what is being affected by that adverse effect. So we administer the Section 106 program. We also receive funding to administer the National Register of Historic Places, and this is what would tie in more to your national park system with National Historic Landmark status and National Register status. Something can be listed to the National Register because it's significant at the local, state, or national level. So our office kind of facilitates that program throughout the state. When you are ready to list something to the National Register, take Huntsville, for instance. You have several historic districts there. You have individual listings. You have National Historic Landmarks, such as Redstone with the, what is listed there? The Jet Propulsion Lab and the several different things listed, because they're NASA related and, they're National Historic Landmarks. So when you start that process, you contact our office and our National Register coordinator, and she kind of walks you through the process. The National Register like with anything with the National Park Service, can be a complicated process. It usually takes 18 months to 3 years to get something listed, depending upon how in depth it needs to be. Like if you're doing something at the national level of significance, which would be like the state capitol here is listed at the national level of significance because of its role, not just in state government, but it's listed at the national level of significance because of its role that it played in the Confederacy during the Civil War. So it would be things like that. You have things like in Selma, the Edmund Pettus Bridge is listed. It's actually a National Historic Landmark, but it's also listed to the National Register as a listed site. The difference between the National Register and a National Historic Landmark is that the National Register is kind of the listing, the official listing of recognized places throughout the United States. A National Historic Landmark goes through a separate process to be designated as a National Historic Landmark. And that's why you have places that become national parks then. They're nationally important to the story and the fabric of America. In Alabama, we have the Civil Rights National Monument in Birmingham, and that is rolling along. We work with the National Park Service to review plans and things that are going on at the A.G. Gaston Motel that is being renovated to look like it did when Dr. King stayed there. We work, throughout the state doing various programs like that with historic credits, which is also a federal program. We also work with local community governments on local preservation issues, such as I do cemeteries and our state register. And I know I'm running out of time. So, so we're just there. We're here to be a service for you and kind of your preservation questions and needs. We also run historic sites across the state of Alabama. There's 13, so places like Pond Spring, which is in Cortland or close to Cortland in Morgan County. There's Fort Morgan, which is at the beach. So these are all your state resources. If you haven't visited our website, I really suggest going there. There's information on every program that I have talked about today, including what I do, which is cemetery preservation, the Alabama Register, survey coordinator, and all of those things. We also have people who could assist you with the state historic tax credit program, federal program, the National Register process. So we're here to be a service to you Alabamians, and we're there for research. We have a new GIS initiative that I'm super excited about and proud of that is on our website. We have over 120,000 documents in our office here in Montgomery, surveys and different historical information on the built environment in Alabama that is being plotted right now on a map. So you'll actually be able to click a dot on a map and it'll pull up all the information we have on that site, whether it be just something that was surveyed, back in like 1970. It could be something that's listed to the Alabama Register, something that's listed to the National Register, or we also have in our cemetery program, we have an Alabama Historic Cemetery Register, which is part of what I do. So I like to think what I get to do is just a bunch of fun because I get to talk to people and talk to them about their stories and what's important. And to me, that's the most important thing about my job is telling you your story and being able to do that registers and preserving that story through documentation. So that's just a little bit about what we do.
Thank you so much, Hannah. We are, I don't know how you got through all of that so quickly, but you did. Can you share the website address? Because I know
Yes.
many of our attendees are intrigued and would like to do further research.
We are AHC, so like Alpha Hudson Charlie .alabama.gov. We have that broken down into different categories, so you can look at our regulatory review, which is what I was talking about with Section 106, or you can look at our preservation programs, which is more what I do with, your hands-on cemetery preservation. We have guidebooks on the proper care of historic cemeteries, the proper care of buildings and things like that. So please check us out. And my contact information is all on there. If you have questions or concerns or, want to talk to me one day, just give me a call.
Super, super. So in our closing minutes, I'd like to pose this question to both of you. Those of us who are on this call and who we are associated with would be considered concerned citizens, maybe nature lovers. What can we do to support your work, the work of your agency, and also to preserve the natural and historic resources of our state and our country? Christine, would you first respond to that?
No, I think that's exactly so important about the role of concerned citizens, of citizens in general, citizen diplomats such as yourselves. One thing that struck me visiting a lot of these national parks, and the same, I'm sure, at the state and local level, Hannah, that was fascinating, because I have to say, like, I can't, that would be so remarkable to go on to, you know, you're at a place, because I did some maps for the historical markers, because, you know, you'd be zooming by and there'd be so much history. So many of these places were protected because of concerned citizens, because the citizens were like, you know, they started either a campaign or letter writing, or, I mean, some of the parks themselves actually have, like, you know, photos or documents showing, you know, what the historical role that the citizen group played. And I just can't underestimate that, because the people that are closest to the object or the land or the treasure or whatever you're trying to protect, they're going to know the most about it, and then they help get the word out. And so, I mean, by visiting the lands responsibly, by visiting all these different sites, by telling other people, you know, being ambassadors, just like your, you know, citizen diplomats and you know, ambassadors for, like, these State Department, you know, related programs and these exchange programs, the same thing for all these different sites, you know, to spread the word, because, I mean, they only exist as long as there's, like, an interested group of citizens that, you know, support it and that spend the tax dollars. And because of COVID, I think there has been a lot more attention, especially to the national parks, because people are seeing it as a refuge. But that's also something to be careful about too, because, once again, that's another reason why I like to promote the lesser visited ones or the state and local ones. There's so much in your own backyard, you don't have to overcrowd a place. So, I mean, I just recommend that you already continue to do what you're doing, which is to be involved and broaden your involvement, if anything.
Thank you, Christine.
I echo what she says. My job doesn't exist without you, because all of these registers and these preservation movements require you, the individual, to go out and tell me what's important to you and why it's important to you and why it should be preserved and why it should be protected. And that's one reason we have these state registers, is because they're for the everyday person, they're for the novice preservationist, to be able to tell your story and document that story through, preserve that story through documentation. Because once that resource is gone, it's gone. It can be an archaeological site one day, but the built environment or, you know, its natural environment, once it's gone, it's no longer there. So especially with historic cemeteries and stones and things like that, there's proper things to do to make those things last longer. Just like in our national parks and with our world, there's ways we can live to make things last longer. Preservation is no different with a building or a site, or things that you can do. And that's what we're here for. And we're here to answer those preservation questions that you might have. We're here to, you know, any concerns you might have over a place that is endangered. I will throw this out there for you Alabama people. Right now we're working with the Alabama Trust for Historic Preservation to list Alabama's places in peril. We do this every year. So we come up with a list of usually 5 to 10 places that are in peril and need your attention and needs, you know, the state's attention. So if you have any sites that you feel are endangered, please look at that on our website as well. But thank y'all so much for having me today.
Yeah, thank you both. This has been quite insightful, and I know that this will only be the beginning conversation. We want to thank all of our participants, those of you who have taken time out of your schedules. We enjoy hosting our Global Perspective Institutes on Tuesdays at 1 o'clock. And we look forward to you joining us next week as we revisit the topic of serving across borders. We'll have part 2, and we have some distinguished panelists, one of whom is on the call, Miss Becky. And we're just delighted and look forward to you sharing with us, and colleagues join us. We have lots to share, and we just want to thank all of you again for taking the time to be with us. Have a great week and stay safe.
Thank you.
Very much. Thank you all.
Thank you.